Hello everyone, I'm Arjun Srinivasan. I'm a fourth year PhD student at Georgia Tech, and I'll be talking about designing multimodal data visualization systems on tablets. This is work done in collaboration with Bongshin, Nathalie, Riche, Steve Drucker, and Ken Hinckley from Microsoft Research. Tablet devices have been around for over a decade now and have become quite a popular platform for human-computer interaction. And given their growing popularity, there's a large body of work looking at how we can design data visualization tools on tablets. And collectively, this work has shown that there are a couple of key challenges when it comes to designing these systems. First, given the limited screen space and problems like occlusion, one challenge is that we want to avoid introducing a ton of menus and instead support more direct interactions with the view. But an issue with designing these direct interactions when the system supports different visualization types is that of maintaining consistency. To understand this better, let's see an example. So these are both instances of interactions from an initial version of the same tool. On the left-hand side, you have a bar chart, and on the right-hand side, you have a scatter plot. Now to sort the bars in a bar chart, what you can do with this system is just drag a finger along an axis. And this makes perfect sense and is actually quite fluid as an interaction. But the issue comes up when you perform the same dragging interaction on a scatterplot's axis, and the system ends up selecting the points because that's a more common operation for scatterplots. Now, this is just one very simple example that I'm using to highlight some of the key challenges while designing visualization systems on tablets. But given these general challenges, our goal with this project was to explore how we can enable both direct and consistent interaction with data visualizations on tablets. In terms of some current solutions, one approach has been to restrict interactions and only use ones that work across chart types. For instance, in the example with the bar chart and the scatter plot, the authors eventually removed the axis swipe interaction from the bar chart because using it for selection and other charts made more sense, even though this was a suboptimal choice for the bar chart itself. The other approach has been to introduce specialized gestures involving multiple hands or fingers, or going back to indirect widget-based interactions. The issue with these solutions, though, is that specialized gestures can be difficult to learn and remember. Furthermore, introducing widgets takes up more screen space and also leads to an interruptive user experience, requiring us to trade off interaction fluidity for consistency. So given the invisible nature of speech and how it complements the directness of pen and touch, we specifically looked at multimodal interaction that combines pen, touch, and speech, and how it can help enable both direct and consistent interaction with visualizations on tablets. With that said, let's look at a video of InChorus, a system that we built to illustrate the proposed multimodal interactions. Just to set up some context, here we're looking at how we can explore a data set of movies to identify the types of movies that a production house might be interested in investing in. As a quick note, the video is going to run for about a minute and a half, but it'll help contextualize the discussions that follow.
To get an overview of the data, I start by looking at univariate summaries of the available attributes. Next, I shortlist genres I want to consider by first looking at the popularity and then return on investment. Worldwide gross and production budget. Sort by worldwide gross in descending order. To explore individual movies, I switch to a scatter plot, comparing the gross and budget values. I add additional filters to focus on the most profitable movies within my budget range. Exclude others. I explore other attributes of the individual movies to shortlist a final set of movies I want to analyze further. Color by creative type. these shortlisted, I update my view to compare them with respect to other attributes and continue with my analysis. Add budget, running time, Rotten Tomatoes, and IMDb rating.
So hopefully that video gives you a sense for the different interactions that you can perform with InChorus and how they collectively support visual data analysis. Now, while designing the interactions, to make sure that we could consistently describe and compare them, we compiled the interactions into a conceptual framework composing of frequent visual analysis operations, along with common UI elements and visualization tools like axes, marks, and legends. And using this framework, we implemented a total of 26 interactions that consistently support 10 low-level visual analysis operations across different chart types. And I encourage you to look at the paper to find more details about the individual interactions. But more so than the interactions themselves, a key aspect here is really the set of design principles that we followed to come up with the interactions. And I'll highlight a subset of these principles now just to give a sense of some of the intricacies that are involved in developing systems like InChorus. So one of the main goals here was again to maintain consistency in interaction across different visualization types. And here's an example of how we enable consistency and overcome the bar chart and scatterplot conflict that I showed earlier. Specifically, because finding details is a common operation across visualizations, we support it by allowing users to simply drag along an axis to directly query for value-based details. But because we have speech as an additional modality, we can still support the optimal interaction of directly allowing users to sort a bar chart through its axis. Specifically, to sort an axis in a bar chart, we allow users to point on an axis and say the word sort along with parameters such as which attribute to sort by and the sorting order. And this flexibility of specifying parameters along with the operation ends up being particularly useful for cases like group bar charts, where there can be ambiguity around which attribute to sort by. Another important aspect of the design was to minimize interactions that were not directly performed on the view. On this front, because we employed pen and touch for different tasks and also combined pen and touch with speech, we were able to avoid external menus and widgets and instead support more direct interactions with the visualization elements like marks, axes, and legends. And finally, if you had to take away one point from this talk about multimodal interaction design, it is that we should design interactions with synergy between modalities in mind and not overemphasize on equivalence. In other words, instead of trying to make sure that all modalities support all operations, we should map operations to modalities based on their semantic relevance. Let's understand this better by considering filtering as an example. So if we shoot for equivalence between two modalities, say speech and touch for instance, we're left with no option but to resort to menus and widgets when it comes to filtering with touch. But why should we do this when we can leverage speech or even the pen's eraser to support filtering in more direct and natural ways? So in InChorus, we follow this principle, and instead of adding more widgets, we allow users to filter using the pen and speech. And ultimately, this not only creates a more fluid interaction experience, but also supports a higher degree of expressivity in terms of specifying the operations. So for example, users can leverage pen and touch for more direct operations involving the view and the specific marks, and specify filters through speech enabling higher level querying. Or alternatively, using the modalities in parallel, one can also select points through the pen and then leverage speech to do things like inverting the selection and filtering out all the points that weren't selected by the pen. And following the 5 design principles, we implemented a total of 26 direct and consistent interactions and tested them across a number of visualization types, including different types of bar charts, scatter plots, line charts, and even parallel coordinate plots. Additionally, to verify the interactions and get some subjective feedback, we also conducted a user study with 12 participants who performed a series of replication and fact-checking tasks on a Microsoft Surface Pro. Overall, sessions lasted between 1 to 2 hours, with participants providing both subjective feedback and answering Likert scale questions about their experience. In terms of task performance, all 12 participants successfully completed the replication tasks, and 3 participants made errors when verifying 2 out of the 5 fact-checking tasks. But overall, participants were fairly positive about the interaction experience, stating that they would frequently want to use the system and that they found the system features to be well integrated. Going a step further, we also analyzed the interactions participants performed during the study, and this helped us observe a number of interesting patterns. For instance, depending on the task context, individual users leverage different interactions for the same operation. Since many operations were supported through direct interactions with the view, quick pen and touch gestures were a popular choice for single-step operations. But for more complex operations involving multiple steps or parameters, participants preferred using speech or combining speech with pen or touch. You can find these and other details about the interaction patterns in the paper, but for now I'll just go through some of the subjective feedback that we got to give a sense for the overall user experience. In general, participants strongly resonated with the idea of synergistically combining different modalities. For instance, this one participant summarized his experience by saying that InChorus feels completely integrated. Like it's this one thing, and it's not like here's the pen stuff that I'm doing now, and now I got to sort through the finger things, and I can do other things with voice commands. It was like, I'm going to interact with the system however best suits me, and I'm able to do that 9 times out of 10. And such a command really highlights how multimodal interactions were natural and enabled a higher degree of expressivity in terms of using the tool. While participants found the interactions familiar and natural to perform, due to a lack of experience with multimodal systems, there was a bit of confusion when they first started. But that said, just with a few minutes of practice, participants said that they were able to overcome this initial reaction and eventually ended up using all modalities when performing the different tasks. And finally, one of the most common sources of confusion was the use of pen and touch. Because not all participants had previously worked with a pen, they expected it to be an alternative to touch and initially found it confusing to use the pen and touch for different operations. But once they got familiar with the tool, participants found this combination rather easy to use, suggesting that there's an opportunity to explore and improve the division of labor between pen and touch going forward. Speaking of going forward, there are a couple of things about the system that we'd like to improve. So InChorus currently includes features like highlighting interface regions to provide interaction affordances and displaying textual feedback to make users aware of the system state. But we noticed that participants often overlooked these features and ended up making errors. So an interesting direction to explore here is how we can make people more aware of what actions are possible and potentially providing better feedback through multimodal output. As I mentioned earlier, we describe interactions in InChorus in terms of some general UI concepts like instruments and parameters. Along these lines, an interesting direction for future work is to see if we can formulate a more general grammar for multimodal interactions with visualizations. So for instance, given an operation like generalized selection, we could define a new interaction pattern specifying the valid instruments and parameters for that operation. Then we can use this pattern to support didactic actions like selecting a mark in a scatter plot and highlighting other points based on attributes of the selected point. And lastly, while we've looked at the interactions in the context of basic visualizations for tabular data, we'd like to explore other types of data, including geographic and data and networks, looking at other visualizations like graphs and maps. So just to summarize, with the design and evaluation of InChorus, we show how we can achieve consistency in interaction across visualization types through pen, touch, and speech-based multimodal input, and how the user experience is amplified when these modalities are used together in a synergistic manner. And with that being said, I thank you all for tuning in, and you can find more details about the project at the link displayed on the top right corner of the screen. Thank you.